All right. And we are live. Today we have Mimi Kalinda, and she's calling in all the way from Africa today. And I just want to make sure I have that right. Calling in from Africa, right?
Absolutely. I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa. Hi, Peter. Nice to see you.
It's so good to see you. And it's amazing because I know you help companies all over the continent in improving their communications with your media and communications company. But you also have an amazing company we're going to focus on today called Storytelling and Leadership. And it's helping leaders define their story. And I think this is huge in energy because we've gone from being a very technical industry to an industry that has to communicate broadly with many stakeholders, the public and everybody. So tell us, Mimi, how do you do that? How do you help leaders define their story?
Well, Peter, something really interesting happened right after COVID in 2020, at the end of 2020, going into 2021, which was first, people started to relate to each other through screens more and more, digital platforms, less and less kind of interpersonal interaction. And so we need to start reimagine it was like creating connections with stakeholders and audiences, both internally inside our organizations, but also outside of our organization in a way that was really meaningful. And so I started to have, having spent 25, 26 years in strategic communications, public relations, the request from my clients started shifting, which was, and they became about, can you teach us how to tell compelling and impactful stories post COVID, right? So that was a fantastic kind of ask because what it made me realize is that slowly but surely, storytelling was going from what we used to consider quote unquote an soft skill to being a power skill. That's what I like to think of storytelling, right? It's a power skill nowadays. The other thing that happened that was quite interesting was that I started to work more and more with subject matter experts and specifically with companies and clients within the energy, climate change, sustainability areas, which is really interesting because I'd always been in the global development space from a communications perspective, but I started to attract more clients that were focused on energy. What I found was that when you're dealing with technical subject matter experts, they're really passionate about what they do. They understand the how and the what of what they do to an absolute T. But being able to communicate that to perhaps people who are not as technical, who may be within their organizations, but also outside externally, became a little bit more challenging. So what we do is work with CEOs in particular, but also manager level employees and staff and put together workshops and programs around storytelling, communications. How do you craft a message that's really compelling? How do you nurture that message into content, format, delivery? And how do you ultimately create the connections that we all want to have with our various stakeholders?
I know, and that's amazing. It's an area that is so much needed. So tell us how, let's say you were going to tell me how to communicate better, and I'm the CEO of, let's say, a major oil company. How do I communicate to the people internally and also the public in a way that allows them to see, okay, here's where we are today. We're bringing a lot of value as a company to the world today. And here's where we're going. And we want to continue to bring value to the world in the future. Pretend I'm your client. How do you make me better? Because I need to be better at communicating. How can I get better at this?
We all do. We all do. And Peter, really interesting because you put me under a lot of pressure. My workshops are usually a day long, but let's try this. Let's try this in the little time that we have together. I think, Peter, as I said, my company is called Storytelling and Leadership. And so the reason being that there's a big part of it that's all about storytelling, but it's not detached from leadership, right? So I'm a big believer that people buy into people before they buy into concepts or ideas or companies, even. So one of the first things that I would ask you, and to be fair, when we talk about leadership, I ask more questions than I give answers. But what is your unique story? I deeply believe that the challenges that we choose to solve in the world directly relate to our own personal story. So, for example, you might identify a problem that you want to solve in the world. I'm aware of that same problem, but perhaps I don't have the same pull towards being a change maker or bringing a solution to that particular challenge. So, Peter, in your world and the challenge that, what is the challenge that you've chosen to solve? And what is your unique story? What positions Peter specifically perfectly to be the person who brings a solution to that challenge?
Oh man, that's so you're bringing it back to me. That's a tough question to answer, and I'll try to do it,
Yeah.
right? So you're going to help me here. So I started off my career as an entrepreneur, and I've been on the side of the table as entrepreneurs in high-tech businesses. That's where I've spent my whole career. And now I've transitioned to being an investment banker because what I found was when I was an entrepreneur, money was always a limitation, and I didn't understand finance. I didn't understand how to use finance to empower my ideas. And so I was constantly struggling to try and bring more money into my businesses. Now, as that I'm a little older, I went from being a 20 something entrepreneur with a lot of energy to being a 40 something banker with a lot of wisdom. So my goal is to take all that hard earned wisdom and find those entrepreneurs that have world changing ideas and empower them with financial solutions so that they can grow their business. And I've chosen to focus on the area of energy and sustainability because I think that's the challenge of our generation is how to intelligently use the energy system to be able to empower our world and give the 3 billion people that don't have energy today cost effective energy, but also do it in a way that's good for the planet. So that's sort of my background and story and how I'm trying to make an impact on the world in a small way.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that, Peter. So, a little bit of feedback. So, the
Please,
first thing,
please, I need it. I'm so bad, and I gotta figure out how
oh,
to
no, not at all. You did a great job. Feedback is the breakfast of champions, right? So, we
Yes,
love
yes.
feedback. But a few pieces of feedback. So, there are three things, important kind of areas, focus areas when it comes to storytelling. The first area is content, and your content really has to be listener centric and audience centric. What happens a lot of the time when you ask somebody to tell you a little bit about themselves, the work that they're doing, the challenge that they're solving for the world, is that they end up giving you a really comprehensive answer about themselves. And granted, that's the story that you asked to hear. But in terms of making your story audience centric, I always ask my audience to count the U's. So you've now told me a story about why this is important to Peter, how Peter got, transitioned from one area to being an investment banker, and the solutions that you're now bringing to the world. I need to find myself in your story. So I'm an entrepreneur. So when you speak about entrepreneurs, you're already speaking to an entrepreneur. I'd love for you to be able to tell the story in such a way that I feel like I'm at the center of. And what we call counting the U's is kind of taking away the I's. I did this and I thought that and I wanted to do this to say, this solution is actually for you. This is how it will help you. This is how I had you in mind as I came up with it. So that completely shifts how your audience receives what you have to say the moment you start to put them at the center. So that's just a little tip around content. And there are many more, right? The second one is around format. So formatting your story. How did you choose what part of your story you were going to tell me first, what you were going to put in the middle, where you're going to put in the end to have maximum impact, right? I'm sure you've heard of the story arc and, the journey of the hero, but it's always really important to me. So I do this exercise kind of called the token exercise with my audience. When you tell me a story about anything, right? So right keys in my hand. I'm going to tell you a whole story about the keys. The keys are not the important thing. The reason that I'm drawn to the keys is the most important thing, right? So for me, keys are the way to open the door of opportunity. And I can go on and on and tell you a whole story about that. And then I could tell you towards the end, oh, by the way, I'm talking about keys because another person could be talking about the same token and so on. Why the keys matter to me is the most important part of the story. So I will lead with that first. So, what do you choose to lead with? What do you choose to put in the middle? And what do you choose to end with as your point of impact? I always recommend that you end with a call to action. So, in the story that you've just given me, Peter, was really interesting because I thought it was a great story. But then I was left thinking, well, what do you want me to do about it? Is there any role whatsoever that I get to play in this story of yours? So, a call to action is very important. And then I think what you got absolutely perfect was your delivery. Your tone was great. You seemed really confident. You were looking at me right in my eyes. It's very difficult because, I mean, we're not necessarily, we're not face to face. So it's difficult to tell. But I thought your delivery was great. And the reason the delivery is really important is because you can have a great story formatted perfectly, but then fall flat on the delivery because you're speaking like this and it's putting me to sleep. Or you're very active and it's driving me crazy. So body language, tone, all of those things are extremely important. So I hope that's helpful.
Oh my gosh. I should pay you for this podcast. It was very helpful. I'm glad we're recording this because I'm gonna take it away and use that in what I try to do because it is so hard. People have short attention spans, because of this, right? So everybody is on their phone.
Exactly.
And it's like the attention spans are shorter. So you have to grab their attention in the way that a social media scroll will grab their attention because that's the standard now that we're under. So
Yeah,
it's really
absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think I always say to my clients, your biggest competitor is distraction because we're so distracted. But an interesting fact that I came across recently. So on average, we spend 8 hours and 32 minutes a day on any one of our devices, right? So your phone, your computer, your iPad or whatever. But interestingly, we don't engage with up to 92% of the content that we come across. So 92% of the content that we consume just kind of comes in and out. No engagement whatsoever. So you see, we're left with a very small margin of 8% of content that actually grabs us? So that's what we're competing against. Not easy.
and not easy at all. And Mimi, I really think what you provide is so critical to companies throughout the energy industry. I'm sitting in Houston today. I don't have my normal background. And there's so much activity going on here in this town of big companies that are world changing companies, but they have a lot of trouble communicating their value to the world. And as a result, there's a lot of pressure on social media and different things that are coming against these sorts of companies. And I really think messaging is maybe the most important thing for energy transition because it requires that all stakeholders get together, not just financial stakeholders, but everybody lives on the planet. So it actually requires all stakeholders to get together, and communications is critical for that.
Absolutely. No, it's a passion of mine. Like I said, for 25 years, I've lived and breathed storytelling and just really happy that, more industries are opening up to the power and the importance of communication.
For sure. And so we're on a short timeline today, I know, because we started late. It was crazy. I want to have you back on the show, but Mimi, I want to make sure that the audience can get in touch with you because I think a lot of
Yes.
people in the audience would benefit from improving their communication. When you say leadership and communication, that's really the core of who our audience is. So, how can they find you and what's your call to action?
Yes, absolutely. I would love to help. Let's have a call, let's have a coffee, and let's see if we can help. I can be reached at mimi@mimikalinda.com. I'm also on LinkedIn as Mimi Kalinda, and my website is storytellingandleadership.com.
I know that's great. And I'm going to give my plug today that we've just decided we're going to be having the Climate Houston conference coming up, hopefully in the fall. And we'll give more information about that to the audience. But we're going to be promoting that. And hopefully, Mimi can help us in promoting Climate Houston, which is a focus here on the city of Houston and its role that it can play in the energy transition. We view Houston as the center of the energy world. So we're excited to announce that today.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Peter.
Well, Mimi, this has really been a pleasure. Mimi Kalinda, if you're a leader and you want to be better at communicating, you've got to get in touch with her. She has a phenomenal communications company as well as a company that helps coach leaders be better in their communication to have a broader impact. Mimi, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for giving me the time. It was lovely speaking to you.
It was wonderful. Thank you.